What is up, everybody? This is Mean Dean from the Outsiders Podcast. Welcome back to Mean Dean's A through Z pay-per-view review. We are still on the letter A, and for this podcast, the letter A stands for Armageddon. Now, Armageddon goes all the way to 2008, so you'll see a lot of Armageddon. We already covered 1999, but now it's time to cover the year 2000. WWE Armageddon from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, again, December 9th, 2000. First off, I want to start by saying this was a pretty phenomenal pay-per-view. There's a lot of stories leading into it, a lot of great matches, including, some would say probably the most favorite of all pay-per-view themes, the guy who goes, "The end is here!" Like that guy. That was a pretty shitty version of it, but a lot of people remember that and they say, "Oh my gosh, I love that thing." It's like, you're fucking right, you love it because everybody loves it. But that was the start of Armageddon 2000. Now, for those of you who have seen Armageddon 2000, you will kind of start to feel the nostalgia a little bit about it as I bring it up and I talk about it. But I want to begin, before getting to the actual match, by saying the entire pay-per-view was built around one match. So much so that if I counted, I would say about 40% of the pay-per-view, including promos, interviews, flashbacks, and the match itself, was all built around this six-man Hell in the Cell match that Mick Foley concocted, saying that this would be the most dangerous match of all time. So they start by promoting the six-man Hell in the Cell match. And the stipulation is, at this time, because Mick Foley is GM, which I still love the GM thing, I wish they would dive more deep into it. I know they have Kurt Angle, I know they have Daniel Bryan, I know they have stories. So the stipulation is that if someone seriously gets injured, Mick Foley will have to retire as GM. The whole point being that somebody's going to get seriously injured, right? After they show that this is the stipulation that Foley could get fired, a limo pulls up and they go backstage. And Briscoe and McMahon and Patterson get out, and Briscoe tells Vince McMahon that, hey, Hell in the Cell is here and Mick Foley brought it. So McMahon's like, over my dead body, we'll see about that. You know how McMahon was back then, way over the top. Which leads us into our first match, which was a pretty good match. And I like that it was a first match. A couple reasons. Number one, there was a heavy story leading into this. Number two, anything with the Hardys or the Radicals, and by Radicals I mean Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero, is all great, right? That's something we all really enjoy watching, especially for those people who are avid wrestling fans from a while ago. So match number one, Hardy Boys with Lita versus the Radicals. So it was Malenko, Guerrero, and Saturn, and it was an intergender elimination match. Now, they start showing the cutaways of Malenko and Lita, and for those of you who don't remember, and it's not very prominent in terms of the history of WWE and pay-per-views and all that, Malenko had a thing, like a kind of a creepy thing with Lita and a creepy storyline. So the point was that he kept trying to work on Lita. Lita was clearly with Matt, and at the time it was just kind of like, well, you're not sure. Malenko's getting kind of creepy, which is weird because everybody loves Malenko, and this is one way to really get him on the heel side. Eventually she just kind of caves in. She's like, okay, Dean, I'll do it. I'll go on a date with you. Well, the Hardys were there when she said that, and they all kind of smirked and kind of knew something was up. So then Lita's like dressed in all lingerie in this hotel room, and she's looking sexy as hell, as Lita does. And Malenko comes in, they get in bed, and Lita's like, what about your wife? And Malenko's like, oh, don't worry about that, as some creeper who's trying to hook up with a chick would do, sure. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they turn off the lights, and they turn them back on, and Matt Hardy goes, how would you like some champagne? And just blasts Malenko in the head with a champagne bottle, which was awesome. Then, I'm pretty sure Jeff Hardy came in, just blasted Malenko with a lamp, so it was pretty vicious, but that was the whole plan, right? So that is the lead up into this actual match. So at first it was a quick start, as you would expect any Hardy and Radical match. Lita hit this twist of fate on Eddie Guerrero, and then Jeff Hardy swantoned him to eliminate him. So it was a really cool visual in succession. Saturn, and for those of you who don't know, Saturn was a very underrated talent with a lot of personal issues, as they had come so often back then. Saturn had something, and they don't call it a DVD anymore. They used to call it DVD, and then of course DVDs became discs. They couldn't use that anymore. But DVD was short for Death Valley Driver, and essentially it's a fireman's carry while he's standing, and then basically dropping the guy on his neck and head, falling to the side. So Saturn hits this DVD. It was a nasty nasty one to eliminate Jeff Hardy. So not only do you have Eddie Guerrero already eliminated, you have Jeff Hardy already eliminated. And there's some really, really good action between Matt Hardy and Saturn. Matt hit this twist of fate. It was just a lot of clubbing blows, a lot of back and forth. It was really, really good action. Matt hit this twist of fate, eliminated Saturn. And for those of you who don't know, Terry Runnels was originally with the Hardys when they first started. Then she moved to the Radicals once Lita showed up. She gets up and tries to distract Matt Hardy while Malenko and him are wrestling. So Malenko rolls him up. All of a sudden, Matt's eliminated. Of course, based on the story, Dean Malenko and Lita are left to fight and see who wins. And again, as I had mentioned in my previous podcasts, a woman wrestling a man back then was very normal, and it was very even. It was very thought out, and it wasn't like this guy is just literally beating the shit out of this woman, or this woman is so much beating the shit out of this guy that it's either A, so unbelievable or really believable depending on the size of the woman. So it's still a little weird watching this, but if anybody knows Lita's career, then they should know that she can hold her own. So Lita and Malenko are left. Malenko superplexes Lita from a top rope. Nowadays, a lot of holy shit moments come by, and it's a lot of in-ring action type stuff. It's not like some guy going through 40 tables at one time. But this was definitely a holy shit moment. And a superplex, just to remind everybody, is from the top rope. Both of them on the top rope. Superplex. And Malenko's got power. So he superplexes Lita from the top rope. And he is not taking it easy on her. I mean, he is really clubbing her to death. So it's pretty crazy. And then he hits the cloverleaf on Lita, which, for those of you who don't know, and I think I've mentioned it before in previous podcasts, me and Dean, favorite submission of all time. Ankle lock second, sharpshooter third, cloverleaf is number one all time. And Lita ends up tapping out. I thought it was a great match. It was a great start. Radicals win. So then Lillian Garcia, and I think this is sort of her start into WWE. She goes backstage and interviews Kurt Angle, who's a part of the Hell in a Cell match. He's just being a total dick about his promo for this. He's like, oh, should I stop training? You interrupted me. Oh, should I stop working hard towards my match? He's just doing the whole heel promo. It's actually pretty good. And then for some weird reason, he's like, are you Bulgarian? And she's like, no. And then he's like, well, then you need to get out of here because I beat Bulgarians to win the medal. And then he just called Alabama a bunch of hicks and did the whole heel persona. It was kind of weird, but it was actually really well done because at that point in time, Kurt Angle was the WWE champion and he was a dick as a heel. It really worked. Then they go into the promo for the Hell in a Cell match at the end. So showing Mick Foley and Triple H in the last Hell in a Cell match with the flaming barbed wire bat, with going through the cage, things like that, just to pump up how crazy it is. Match number 2, we have William Regal, who is now the head of NXT. He's the commissioner, versus Hardcore Holly for the European title. And that's kind of one of those throw-in matches. But believe it or not, again, I say underrated a lot, and I'll probably say that a lot through these pay-per-views. William Regal is one of the most underrated talents, period. Number 1, every character he worked was a pretty good character. It's kind of shitty sometimes. It's kind of boring. But overall, he worked a good character. And he could hold his own in the ring against anybody. And Hardcore Holly is no exception in terms of the blows he throws. He's very stiff. He's very snug. So Regal starts out the match actually coming out as a European champ and saying, I'm here to help you, Alabama. I'm here to be your savior. So when you blow your nose or when you feel a bunch of snot coming out of your face, use a snot rag. Or a handkerchief. He said, use a handkerchief, not a snot rag. He's like, that will help you look more proper and it'll help your hygiene. It would improve your hygiene. And he said, I know Alabama loves their animals, but please stop loving your animals too much. It was actually really, really funny. Holly's music hit. He came out. Now the match was okay. It was what was expected. Holly hit a generic backdrop, but it looked like he actually rattled his head a little bit. So that's why when they say, these things are not safe for doing at home, things like that. Believe it or not, I mean, you could say wrestling's fake, but that's a bad F word. Wrestling may be scripted, but a guy hitting a generic backdrop and like rattling his head, maybe even getting a concussion, that's serious stuff, right? So he's kind of grabbing his head, but honestly, even through that, Holly was really holding his own technically against William Regal, who's a technical wrestler. The great thing about this is that Hardcore Holly, well, they call him Hardcore Holly or Bob Holly. Before that, he was a generic wrestler guy, so he could definitely hold his own. He hit this rough Northern Lights from the top rope. And for those of you who don't know, Northern Lights are typically just a top rope leg drop. But man, it looked like he came across William Regal's face. And then randomly, Raven just interferes and DDTs Holly, and William Regal is the winner. I'm not sure where the storyline goes because we are only doing the pay-per-views, and I don't quite remember that point in time because Raven was kind of in and out of promotions, but but Regal retained the title. The next interview was Rakishi. He was also a part of the six-man Hell in a Cell. And the only notes I took on that was that it was a smidge better than last year's. And for those of you who didn't listen to the Armageddon 1999 review, I would suggest going back and listening to what Rakishi said because it is fucking hilarious and really stupid. Match number 3. Now I'm going to preface this match number 3 with a group that I think was, I can't say they were underrated because they were just, their characters were really good, but I just don't think from a collective standpoint it was a great group. Some people call it RTC, others would call it Right to Censor. And essentially you took all these people who were a part of these crazy things in the late 90s. Val Venus, the Godfather who is now the Good Father, Bull Buchanan's kind of random, Ivory, those Steven Richards is the other one. Those people are all in this group called Rights to Censor. And if you don't remember, their theme song for coming out was just a crazy car alarm, basically. That's all it was. So super annoying. So match 3 was China versus Right to Censor Val Venus. I have to say that because everybody knows Val Venus essentially started as a porn star. So China actually ran out before Val Venus got there and started the match outside the ring, which was really cool. But then the match got kind of typical. It got kind of generic. Some random clotheslines, some holds, things like that. At that point, I was just losing a little bit of interest. And King was making butterface jokes to China, saying everything's good, butterface, which it's kind of funny because, like I said in one of my previous podcasts, I'm starting to learn more that people may fetishize the late 90s and the Attitude Era more than we should. Honestly, King's a great color. He is a very funny guy. He's very inappropriate. That makes him unique. Some of those things are just kind of funny. And some of those things are like, all right, dude, whatever. So Val hits a fisherman suplex and he's the winner. That's pretty much it. Not a great match to rave about. It's not Armageddon 1999 China vs. Jericho. That was a much better match, but it was okay. It was okay. After that, they had more Cactus and Triple H footage. And then they go back to the back and Vince is talking to Stephanie. At that time, Stephanie McMahon was the GM of SmackDown. Eric Bischoff was the GM of Raw. Sorry, I take that back. I'm thinking ahead. Stephanie McMahon was the GM of SmackDown. Mick Foley was the GM of Raw. And Vince is talking to Stephanie about needing to put a stop to the Hell in the Cell match. It's too dangerous. They're scared, and Stephanie is, of course, in full support of her father, as she always is. After that, they have a Taker interview. And if I'm not mistaken, it might be Kevin Kelly, might be Michael Cole, I can't remember. And essentially, Taker's just in the Hell in the Cell. And he's literally telling everybody about how sadistic he is and how he feels about when he gets in there. So they first showed footage of him and Shawn Michaels. Then they kind of showed the events backwards, which was kind of funny. Then they show takes of him and Mick Foley as well in Hell in the Cell. And of course, everybody who has ever watched wrestling, or even people who watch the highlights of wrestling, that would be up there as one of the craziest moments of all time. And Vince McMahon comes out to the ring, basically to say the meaning of what he said last Monday night. And that was a crazy Raw because he had told Linda he wanted a divorce, that she'd never be good enough for him, and that he honestly thinks Hell in the Cell is just the biggest mistake ever. So he asked the fans about safety and he said, I want 5 seconds of silence for the people who are going to compete in Hell in a Cell, just really playing up the brutality of Hell in a Cell. And nobody would, so the next match, which I would consider, or I would have considered, one of the matches of the night was Chris Jericho versus Kane in the Last Man Standing match. So to me, I was like, damn, this is actually going to be really good. I do not remember this match at all. So let me kind of go through it real quick and we'll kind of dissect it. So Chris Jericho versus Kane, Last Man Standing, starts on the ramp naturally, as we would expect those things to start. And then they kind of make their way to the back quickly, so I'm like, I'm ready. This is perfect. This is exactly what I want to see. And then somehow Mideon's in the back. For those of you I don't know who Mideon is, he's just a random guy who used to be a part of a stable with Viscera, with The Undertaker, things like that. Not much goes on in the back. Just a couple throwing people into the walls, and all of a sudden they're right back to the ramp, right back to the ring area. In mid-match, and by mid-match, I mean this was probably a good 16-minute match. It was just boring. It was just generic in-ring stuff, and I was just kind of bored by it, which was a surprise because Kane looked like he was in the best shape of his life. And everybody knows Jericho. He's the GOAT. So it's hard for me to believe that this was going to be a boring match, and it turned out that it was kind of. There was they started to make their way back up to the ramp, and there's this crazy bulldog from this prop box to this table from Jericho to Kane. That was pretty cool. And then all of a sudden Kane's down, and Jericho takes this like big connected prop set of metal barrels and pushes it. Takes him a second because it looks really heavy, and pushes it over and lands on Kane. And then they count the 10. As he's down. So what was strange about it is Teddy Long was kind of taking, for those of you who don't know, Teddy Long was SmackDown GM. He was a referee before that, also managed Doom, a few other guys. So Teddy Long wasn't counting very fast during the other times, which is kind of strange. He's almost taking his time and getting distracted. But in this one, it was 1, 2, 3. It's like, dude, hold on, slow down. That's not how you count last man standing. So my gut tells me that they were over on their time for their match. So they're just trying to get it done as quickly as possible. I think that caused some suffrage a little bit in terms of how the match went, how it was supposed to go, things like that. So it was kind of a disappointment. Back then, again, I mentioned before in one of my previous podcasts, they have a WWE New York, right? WWE New York was like Planet Hollywood. It's a restaurant, bar, stage, all these things, wrestling all over the place. It was pretty cool. So Shawn Michaels shows up there to talk about his first Hell in a Cell match. And that was it. It was probably a 20-second interview. And then it was done. And I think that's when Shawn was still going through some troubles. So I don't think he wanted to be there that long either. And then they start showing more of the King of the Ring, Hell in a Cell with Mick Foley and Undertaker. And then what was also really funny, it's relevant to what's going to be happening in a couple of years here, is they were showing the team of the Birmingham Bolts. For those of you who don't know, the Birmingham Bolts were a football team in the XFL. The XFL is coming back in 2020, crazily enough. Who knows, maybe they'll have the Birmingham Bolts again. Match 5, Edge and Christian versus Bull Buchanan. And basically the Good Father at this point. They're all right to censor. So it was Edge and Christian versus Bull Buchanan and the Good Father, right to censor, versus the Dudleys versus K-Quick and the Road Dogg for the tag titles. For those of you who do not know who K-Quick is, he would also be known in Total Nonstop Action as Ron the Truth Killings, and known now in the WWE by R-Truth. K-Quick used to team up with Road Dogg, and gosh dang it, if I swear they had an actual team name, but I can't remember. For having Edge and Christian, for having the Dudleys, these guys, is kind of a very generic match. Tables came in, but then they're stopped. Edge and Christian got the win. I literally put no other information on that other than the fact that Edge and Christian got the tag team titles. It wasn't a very good match for a pay-per-view, so that was kind of tough. The next match was Billy Gunn versus Chris Benoit for the Intercontinental title. And at first it was a little sloppy by Billy Gunn. It was kind of strange because Billy Gunn's not a very sloppy wrestler, especially with having somebody in there to carry him like Chris Benoit. And Benoit is always a technician, always throwing down reverse cross faces and German suplexes and all these things. And all of his transitions to crossface were great. They're really, really good. Benoit wins the IC title. You know the rest, unfortunately. Then Stone Cold has an interview with JR about Hell in a Cell, and he talks about how Stone Cold's never slept, things like that. So, again, playing to the implication of what it could be. Match number 7, Ivory versus Molly Holly versus Trish Stratus for the women's title. Now, this was a little bit of her early Trish Stratus title match, so she wasn't all there yet. She still had a little bit of hesitation. So at the start of the match, I was like, man, that does not look like Trish Stratus. Well, she was just starting to get into the in-ring competition, just starting to get the feel of things, so this was part of that hesitation. Molly powerbombed Trish. It was a pretty nasty powerbomb. And then Ivory covered to keep the belt. So again, not a lot going on in these matches. Very generic matches. And here at TOP Mean Dean, I don't want to give you the entire breakdown of a generic match that has drop kicks and leg kicks and DDTs. I want to give you all the good details of the match. Now, Test and Albert, or TNA, come out to help Trish. Crash Holly comes out to defend. And then all of a sudden the APA makes their return. The Acolyte Protection Agency, Bradshaw and Ron Simmons. And they just went out there and beat the shit out of everybody. Now, last match. Match everybody's been building up to. The 6-man Hell in a Cell match for the WWE title. Kurt Angle versus The Undertaker versus Rakishi versus Triple H versus Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. Now, immediately everybody comes out, right? This is a quick match. Everybody wants to get in there, get it done. This is brutal as all hell. Austin doesn't even get in the cage, just starts attacking Kurt Angle right away. Then goes right after Triple H, because this is around the time that Rakishi, who drove the car, ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin, but Triple H is the one who ordered the hit. They finally all get in, Cell gets locked. And there's a lot of outside of the ring action, but it's still within the cage. That's primarily most of it that's actually happening. And then there's a lot of finishers in this one. So early pedigree on Rakishi, early Olympic slam on The Rock, early stunner on Kurt, early choke slam on Austin. I mean, they're all going at it. Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe and Vince McMahon come out with this truck full of hay or something, back it right up to the cage and pull the door off it to get them to stop. Foley comes out and stops them, makes them go back, but the truck is still out there. So Stone Cold and all these people are now out into the ramp. They're using prop cars, they're throwing guys through glass. Austin gets busted open after going head first through the glass. There's a pedigree on top of a car. It's just insanity at this point. So then they all start to make their way up on the top of the cell, and Stone Cold even hits a Stone Cold stunner on Triple H on the top of the Hell in the Cell. There's a nasty chair shot to Angle from Undertaker, and they all start to kind of disperse. Some make their way down. It's Undertaker and Rakishi up there, basically. And I don't know if anybody really remembers this, but this is one of those crazy Hell in the Cell moments where Undertaker literally chokeslammed Rakishi from the top of the cell all the way down to that bale of hay in the back of the truck. So it was nuts. And there's a lot of really good face-offs with Stone Cold and The Rock, Stone Cold Triple H and The Rock, and a lot of good action. After a few finishers from each one of them, Kurt actually rolls up on somebody who got a finisher on them, pins, Kurt Angle still retains. It was a crazy pay-per-view, and it was probably one of my favorites so far up to the few that I've done to call, so I highly recommend going to check that out. Before I let you guys go, do not forget the Outsiders Podcast. We are on Podomatic.com, also known as ClickPod Inc. or at ClickPod on Twitter. We are also on Facebook, and we are on iTunes and YouTube as well, so please go check us out everywhere. But most importantly, please throw some support our way in getting this up and running a little bit more. We just hit our year mark on February 5th. Please check out our Patreon page. We are going to be posting more there. Even if you donate just as little as $1, that will get you more up-to-date information on what we're trying to do in our schedule. Anything above that, it's just gravy. You can even write a show with us in order to create more TOP stuff, what you want to hear. All right, everybody, that's it for me and Dean, in Armageddon 2000. This is TOP, ClickPod Inc. We done.